If you use Facebook, you are already familiar with this screen. And if you have ever used ChatGPT, you have definitely seen this animated screen. In this video, we will recreate both of them in Android Studio. Okay, so I have created a new project. Now we need to implement the splash screen library. Search splash screen. Then open this page. Now copy and paste the dependency into your build.gradle. The latest version is 1.0.1. Now hit Alt plus Enter and click on this. Finally, click Sync. It will take a few seconds. The library is now successfully implemented. Okay, open your themes.xml file and define a new theme for the splash screen. Since a theme is already defined for our app, I'm just duplicating it and renaming it to use it as the splash theme. In the name field, type whatever you want. In the parent field, make sure to use theme.splashScreen. In this theme, add the splash screen background. You'll get an error because this API is available only on Android 12 and above, but our app supports Android 8, 9, 10, 11 as well, since my main SDK is Android 8. So just hit Alt plus Enter, then click here, and a new theme file will be created. In this theme, whatever you code will be executed in Android 12 and above. Next, we will add a post-splash screen theme. This means that after the splash screen finishes, this theme will be applied to the app, so it doesn't mess up with the normal activity theme. After this, we will add a background color to the splash screen. In my case, it's black, and here's the color code for it. As you can see, the default splash screen color is white. That's because we haven't set our custom splash theme in the manifest. So open the manifest, set the theme in your activity, and then set it in the application as well. Now you can see that our splash screen background has been set, but just adding a background isn't enough. Let's add custom icons to make it look more appealing. For this, we will download vector images, also known as SVG icons. You can find plenty of icons on Google. Make sure to select SVG here and hit download. After downloading the icon, open Android Studio. Then click on the menu, hover over New, and click on Vector Asset. In this section, select your SVG icon. You can rename the icon as well. As you can see, it's added in the suitable format for Android Studio. So first, I'm simply adding this icon to the splash theme. Although it's not an animated icon, we will still have to use animated icon attribute. The icon did show up, but it's extremely large for the splash screen. So open the icon file, and inside the vector tag, let's create a group. Inside this group, add all the path data and whatever else you have for the icon. Now, we can easily change the scale. In this case, 0.5 means it will be half of its original size. But the icon needs to be centered. For that, use pivot. I think it should be even smaller. For this section, we will use a vector image as well. The bottom vector is called the branding image, so add it to the theme like this. As you can see, the logo is very large and looks squished. That's why first I'm going to use the scale attributes like before. But it still looks squished because the official documentation says to use a 200x 80dp image. So let's resize it. Since we are changing the width and height, we also have to update the viewports. After that, set pivot Y to half of the viewport height and pivot X to half of the viewport width. This will position it in the center. In this case, making pivot X half of the width didn't work because the SVG image we downloaded was actually designed for square sizes. Since we are not animating this branding image, we can break the rule without worrying about it. By the way, we can also control the splash screen programmatically. In the onCreate method, right at the top, just call install splash screen and you'll get an instance of it. If you return true, inside this method, it will hold the splash screen indefinitely. So if you want to delay showing your main content, like waiting for data to load, you can do that here. However, if you try to use a mutable state here, it won't work. Because we are outside the composable area. We could use it if we were inside the set content block. That's why we need to use a view model to hold the state. For that, let's create a Kotlin class that will be our view model. Then extend the view model class. Inside this class, we will hold our state. First, create a private mutable state flow. Then create another state flow for public access, but make it immutable. Mutable means it can be edited, but immutable means it can be edited. This means the first one is private and can be updated, while the second one is public and read-only. That's why we expose it, so we can access the value of the main state safely. Then in the view model scope, call delay for 500 milliseconds. And after that, simply set the state to false. This is how we can delay for 5 seconds. Now in the activity, let's define the view model. Inside it, use view model provider where you pass the context as a parameter, then call the get method and type your view model class name like this. In the keep on screen condition, pass the value of the state we created. Have you noticed that it took more than 5 seconds? Well, that's because the delay runs after the actual loading session ends. So, if your original loading takes 2 seconds, it will only be delayed by 5 seconds after those 2. If you want, you can animate the splash icon before the screen is removed. Let's say I want to rotate the icon smoothly before the splash screen exits. For that, we can create a value animator of float which smoothly changes its value. Now, what's float? Float is a type among others like integer, boolean, or string. If you call start, the animator will begin animating its value from 0 to 90. Then we will need to add an update listener, and from there we will set the rotation value of the icon. We can also listen for when the animation is finished, and at that point we will remove the splash screen. But yeah, I forgot to set the duration for this animation. It has smoothly rotated the icon before exiting the splash screen. I think we should reduce the delay time now, just for testing. But you know what? If you want to build high quality apps, you don't want a situation where your user is on light mode but your splash screen background is black, basically dark mode. So the splash screen should match the system theme, right? To resolve this problem, we will create a colors file for dark mode. Right click on values, then create a new colors file. Now select night mode and choose night from the drop down. Here we can define the background color for dark mode. Make sure to use the same color name in both the dark and light color files. Now in the splash theme, use the color we just defined. This gives our app a more professional tone. But if it's not enough for you, hit the like button because now we are going to create this animated splash screen just like ChatGPT. Again, we will download an SVG icon of ChatGPT from the same website. In Android Studio, import it as a vector drawable. If you want to rename the icon, just press Shift plus F6. First, we will add this icon to the splash theme without any modification, just to get a rough idea of its size. In this case, we don't need a branding image. However, we do want the icon color to adapt to the system theme. So let's define the icon color in both the light and dark colors files. Then use that color in the fill color attribute inside the icon file. Now that we have a rough idea of the icon size, so we can easily scale it to fit perfectly. Just create a group and then scale Y, then scale X, and finally pivot Y and pivot X. Now the icon fits nicely in the splash screen. Finally, it's time to animate this icon. We need to create an animator that will animate the icon, but the splash theme doesn't support using an animator directly. So we will create an animation holder drawable which connects the animator with the icon. Then in the splash theme, we will use this animation holder as the animated icon. First, I'm creating an animator. Make sure to select animator as the resource type. Instead of using set, we will go with object animator. Now add a property values holder. We need to define the property we want to animate. If I manually change the rotation value in the group, the icon rotates. And that's exactly what we want to animate. The value type will be float. We have already talked about that. The from value will be the starting rotation and to value will be the final rotation. For now, let's keep it from 0 to 90. Then set the duration for the animation. Google recommends keeping it under 1 second. So let's go with 1000 milliseconds. And now the animator is ready for testing. But as you know, the theme can directly hold the animator. We need a drawable that will act as the animation holder. In this drawable, add the animated vector attribute, then point to the icon file we want to animate. After that, add a target, specify the animator name and the group name inside the icon that we want to animate, which we haven't defined yet. So let's go ahead and define the group. Finally, just set this up in the splash theme. But as we already know, the ChatGPT icon doesn't start rotating immediately. Instead, it starts off slow and then speeds up. To achieve that, we can use keyframes, just like we do when editing videos. In keyframes, 0 is the starting point of the animation and 1 is the end. So when the fraction is 0, the rotation value will also be 0. Since we are using keyframes now, we don't need these attributes anymore. Then when the fraction is 0.3, meaning 30% of the animation duration, the rotation will still be 0. That means the icon won't rotate during the first 30% of the animation. Finally, at the ending keyframe, the value will be 90. So obviously, the rotation happens between 30 to 100% of the animation time, while the first 30% remains still. If you want, feel free to experiment with different values and fractions to find what looks best for you. Next, we will create the scale down animation. When the fraction is 0, I'm setting the original scale. At fraction 0.3, I'm keeping the original scale as well. Then finally, the scale will go down to 0. Just copy paste it and do the same for scale X. But it feels like a bit too fast. So I'm setting the duration to 1100. I know it's not recommended to go beyond 1000, but for the sake of experiment, let's try it. Now I'm keeping the original scale up to 0.7 fraction, so it will only start scaling down after 70% of the animation is complete. And now it's starting to look kind of similar to ChatGPT. We can definitely tweak and enhance it later if we want. However, now we need to create the dot. So open ChatGPT and give it the viewport and size of your vector. Then ask it to create a dot's path data for you. Create another group in this icon file and paste the path data there. Don't forget to keep it above the ChatGPT icon path data. After that, give this group a name, which we will need in the animation holder. For animating this dot, I'm creating another animator just like before. If we use 2 as the scale, I think it will be big enough. And then it will start growing when 90% of the animation is complete. But make sure to keep the same duration for both animators. Now open your animation holder and set it up just like we did earlier. On the screen, we can't see the dot yet. That's because we haven't set its color. Now it looks pretty similar to ChatGPT, but after testing a few values in the keyframes, I found a setup that matches even better. You can find the source code of this app in the video description. Okay, so we have talked about Android 12 Plus. Now let's look at the older versions. Unfortunately, there's no dedicated API for them. That's why we need to create a drawable file that will act as the splash screen. Instead of using a selector, we will use a layer list. Then add an item which will be the background. For backgrounds, we usually don't need to set height or weight, but just to show you how it works, I'm adding them here for demo purposes. After that, add another item. This one will hold the icon. In the theme, we will set this drawable as the window background. Looks kind of weird, right? So let's fix that. I'm now removing height and width from the background, but keeping them for the icon. Now let's add gravity to center the icon. If you want, you can even add multiple drawables here. But remember to change your activity theme. Just make sure to call set theme after the onCreate line. That way, the splash theme is shown before the activity is created. And once it's created, the theme switches back to your normal app theme. If you are using the exit animation on Android 12 Plus, you need to call the install splash screen method. But since our app also supports older versions, we will first check if the device is running Android 12 or above before calling it. Wait, what about animation? Well, you actually can't animate the splash screen on older Android versions. What many developers do is show a static splash screen like this, then create a separate activity just to play the animation, and after a delay, they open the main activity. But honestly, that's not recommended. Splash screens shouldn't cause intentional delays. They are meant to fill the empty space while your app loads, not slow it down on purpose. And of course, one thing you can do is hit that subscribe button.